Hi there, my name is Avon, and this is First Drafts That Glow, a short story writing project featuring me. Last week was a superhero story that I really enjoyed writing for you. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. I told you that I'm going to be focusing on story genres and story types, approaches that I haven't really given a fair shake to, or I haven't done. So I feel I did good on superhero last week. So this week, I'm going to go into historical fiction or alternate history. And I really went out of my way to avoid throwing in steampunk, throwing in, some sci-fi stuff. I just, kind of thought about like a world that would exist if, I don't want to give the story up too much, but, just imagine if France and Spain couldn't help America out before it, with George Washington and, the revolution and stuff. That probably wouldn't have gone really well for them. So I'm hoping you like this story. It's a little short, and I did kind of feel like I could have done better, but I still really like this story. I do kind of the what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for, so I'm just going to do the one ad read that I have right now. I don't have anybody that supports this show, so I'm going to read ads for myself and my projects and stuff that I'm involved with. And I have currently produced with a friend named Athens Cascade, some coloring books. The first two coloring books are detailed and eccentric patterns, and the third book is based on the power of 5. And I have copies of 2 of them. I don't have the third one yet, but here they are: Mindful and Funky 1 and Mindful and Funky 2. And you can find them on Amazon, but you can also just go to my website, nailsthatglow.com. There's a link, Books That Glow. These are pretty great. They're a little larger than normal books, and they're all one-sided pages, and they're just great. I mean, I am kind of biased because, Athens and I worked on this, and we think it's pretty great. So go check that out. It would really help us out, really help out the show, really help out more projects. There are more merchandising options we're looking at because I have been asked to make some of the title cards for these stories available in different mediums. So working on that. So check back on that soon. Now, I think we should get started because I have this extraordinary, man, I can't even talk and I'm about to read for you. I have this extraordinary habit of just rambling on for, forever before getting into the story. And, a little bit of feedback I've gotten is like, get to the frickin' story. Okay, I'll get to the story. But also, I do want to say the second plug because, I should write this down. I really should write this down. But, I like improving, so whatever. And you love it. You love it. You love watching me just go all over the place. I know you do. So, the other plug is I have a podcast, Abstractions That Glow. Yesterday's show had a friend of mine, his name is Lauren, and, we talk about some stuff together, and it was his first show that he had ever done. So it was really fun to record, and I hope you enjoy listening to it, so go check that out. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, really. So I'm just going to get into the story. And I really should script some of this out. I should. But, should is a dirty word. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Should is a dirty word. It absolutely is, because you don't want to should all over yourself. Oh, and you might also notice that the sepia and black and white stuff that's happening here. Oh my, what does that mean? Well, you do historical stuff, and, you kind of fall into the trope of like doing old timey looking pictures and video and stuff like that. So I'm doing that too, because shut up. It's just something I'm going to do, and you're going to deal with it. All right. So this story is called Somatic and Authentic, a First Drafts That Glow story by me. Jenny looked over the street through her window to see a number of street rats digging through the waste gutters. She never quite understood how a child could be made to sift through piss and excrement in hopes of finding a shilling or anything of value. Just as she had thought, two of the children, or just as she had this thought, two of the children began cheering for having found a few pence and a bit of metal they were claiming was gold. Probably a tin watch cover, she mutters to herself, stepping out of the pale light. She looks over her husband resting in oblivion, on his back, producing a soft snore. His thick mustache covered in a taffeta band to keep it from getting messed up if he ever did roll to his side. She thought it made him look silly. A pale yellow bit of silken fabric almost glowed against his copper skin in low light. His balding head made him grow more ostentatious with his facial hair. She often wondered if she would have ever had that kind of obsession. In the kitchen space against the north wall, there was a water pump recently installed and connected to the first system of its kind. Jenny pictures the pipes running down into a massive reservoir made of limestone and fed fresh water from recently discovered underground springs of hot water. The paper explained this made for the cleanest water in the entire world, and a great success of the 19th century that would not be matched for 100 or more years. Jenny loved not having to boil and filter water to make sure her humors were never thrown out of balance. Her friends often made fun of her for how cautious she would be about eating and drinking out in public. She just never wanted to go through what her mother did when she drank water that was not clean. For 3 days, she would convulse and bleed from every possible part of her body until the light in her eyes vanished as she died twitching. The doctors insisted it was some kind of disease that could only affect women. Jenny knew better. At this time, she was attending school, and she had just learned of Dr. Snow and his demonstrations of sickness. Learned of the opinions of Dr. Snow and his demonstrations of sickness being a matter of touch more than that of air or miasma. He also belonged to a group that was not in agreement that women were so different from men, aside from organs of reproduction. This was where she decided to become Jenny and move from Liverpool to London. You are considered a man, she would think. 13 and in possession of a few trinkets and a musket made in the American colonies, her father had told her that they fought with the British to abolish the slavery. Hold on. What did I say there? Her father had told her that they fought with the British to abolish the slavery of African and quell a rebellion that could have destroyed the world. The British fought the Americas. I think, this is why we're here, though, right? It's a first draft, and it glows because it's beautiful. Let's see, to abolish the slavery of the African people and quell a rebellion that could have destroyed the world. He had purchased the musket in a place called New York from a man calling himself Wind Killer. Jenny wanted to see the British cities on the coast and the people in the mainland that wore feathers in their hair and walked around showing off their legs and shoulders. She also had read they had people like her. They called them Two-Spirit, and they didn't have to hide. She sold the musket and most of the trinkets, purchased fabrics and makeup, spent 3 days making simple dresses and experimenting with applications. Eventually, she felt confident to get a job in a public house and then a social club as the kitchen manager. 3 years later, and she found a doctor that helped her continue to live as she wanted. The cost was massive, as the medical field was still critical of anyone outside of the many nations being one of these two spirits. So medicine and any other treatment had to be dressed in believable ways to prevent criticism and exposure. Jenny finally got to a point where she only needed one pill, and the ability to buy a year's supply was not nearly as expensive. Around this time, she had met her husband. Her husband was in the parliament trying to open the borders for the many nations peoples, give them permission to move to other places in the British Empire. She was so thrilled a man so much like her in mind was proudly advocating for the many nations to be equal part of the empire. She would sit in the public house he would attend and listen to his passionate and excited ways of speaking to others to rally them to his way of thinking. His mind and drive was so very appealing. The day she told him what made her different from other women, she was afraid he would be repulsed. She had fallen in love with him so deeply. His acceptance of her was just another thing that made him a perfect man. 5 years later, they were married and moved to a posh district of London. She still managed a social club kitchen, only this one was attended by the lords and members of Parliament. She ran a strict kitchen and would often import recipes from the Americas to have on the menu along with the traditional English foods. She discovered the corn-based dishes were becoming most popular. This morning was the first day of her vacation. Her husband had 2 meetings to attend on this day, and then he would be free. They would be going to travel to a British city named Boston and meet with some of the many nations' leaders to get documents and bring a few representatives back to the heart of the empire. Jenny and her husband both agreed the only way the lords would even consider recommending to the queen that these people would be safe for the country is if she could meet them. Her husband swayed Parliament with ease, and the Prime Minister was often just a puppet of the Queen. So, getting the Lords on their page, that was the hardest path. Her mind continued to race as she finished boiling water and Her mind continued to race as she finished boiling water to add to the tea kettle. The strong smell of the spice blend from Mumbai would wake her husband up. She speared a few bits of sweetbread to toast and laid 2 thick cuts of pork belly on the plate above the flame. Mere moments of the room filling with smells of sweet spice and meat. I misspelled spice, so it says soice. No, did I just snort? I snorted. Oh my God, I snorted. Okay. Mere moments of the room filling with the smells of sweet spice and meat conjured her husband as if it was a spell. The fabric still laying across his face, making his smile at seeing Jenny look farcical. "Good morning, sweet Lady Jenny," holding out his arms as he walks to her, then wrapping her and kissing her cheek. "Good morning to you, my silly man." Pulling off the fabric from the mustache, she arranges it before kissing him. "Now be a good boy and set out our plates as I finish preparing our tea." "Yes, my lady." A soft kiss on her hand and he backs away. Sweet and creamy, since it's that spiced tea, please. Of course. It is how it is served, silly. Ha! The house fills with his exclamation. At times, your bite is so refreshing. It is such a bore in the house to listen to those stuffed pork pies speak in circles and never say a definitive thing. You are exuberant this morning. Sitting with the tea tray, setting the cups at each of their seats, she looks over the details of the table. The paper, the spices and sauces, all set precisely as she liked. The 2 young women she hired for the house were such talented and hard-working youths. She had to remember to give them a bonus before leaving. Are you excited to travel to the Americas still? The 8-day journey on an iron float with 1,000 other people is not my idea of a vacation, but I am excited to fulfill this dream of yours. Everything else it may accomplish is simply a blessing the Lord has graced me with. You are made of wit and fire today, husband. Her smile widens as he arranges the plates of toast and meat before their seats. Thank you. You are most welcome. He sits, taking a bite of the meat and the entire cup of tea. Motions to the teacup with a smile as he chews. You eat like an animal at times, refilling his tea with 2 lumps and a hearty splash of cream, and then the spiced tea. You can stir it yourself. I am most excited to see Boston. I am told the museum has items used in the Revolutionary War. It is kept by the descendants of the men and women they tried to hold as slaves. I wonder if either of us have relations over there. The pork belly slice vanishes into his mouth. Well, it would be hard to track that. The records of the people were mishandled intentionally, as I understand it. I'm just happy our world did not entertain slavery as a method of country building. I can only imagine what kind of empire this would be if all we did was colonize and eradicate each culture we met. Yes, it's quite the mental exercise. Looking over the table, he grabs the butter. Typos really trip you up when you're reading. Just saying. Looking over the table, he grabs the butter dish, slicing off a large chunk onto the bread. I know you entertain yourself with writing fantasy at times. Why not write a story that imagines what might have happened if those 13 colonies had sufficient support and won? Interesting you say that. I was just talking to some of the girls yesterday about the state of France at the time. The disease that ran through Spain and France nearly wiped them out. Thankful we did not get the sickness here. Delicate bites and sips, Jenny pictures her mom for a moment. We just got the Lords to agree to enhancing the medical college funding for that reason. The empire must remain strong. I hear rumors the Russian czars are dealing with similar sickness. The reports suggest it is typhus. The French never quite got control of it, and the contamination into Russia must have been worse than they let on. I might take some notes on the boat trip. 8 days of no working and no places to walk and enjoy the company of my friends. I may find it dull. Looking over his wife. Woman, there will be nothing dull about spending time with you. The rest of the morning, the staff in the rooms below softly giggled and blushed as they heard the sounds of passion. Later that day, Jenny had set the bonus promissory notes in the task journal for the staff with a small set of directions and the window of time they would have off. She sent for her personal maid to meet her in the bedroom and help her pack. Ah, did you decide to go by Franny, or do you still wish to be called Farah? Jenny motions for the young girl to enter. Miss, I think I have decided against the English name. I like the poetry of Farah. The girl blushes as she lowers her head. Jenny smiles, looking to catch the girl's eyes to look up. That is wonderful news, Farah. It is always important to know who you are. Besides, I love that name. Your family is from Morocco, is that right? It is, miss. My family was part of the volunteer forces sent to quell the revolution. We have lived in England since the end of that war. My family is not keen on adopting English names and traditions still. Placing her right hand near her neck as she speaks, she quickly lowers it when she notices Jenny watching her hand. "Oh, I know your religion, Farah. It's not a house that places the Archbishop or the Pope as the final authority. In fact, I do think my husband does not fully accept there is a God." Farah blushes deeply. "Oh my, I'm not sure how Allah would take that." Glancing down, "Sorry, miss, that was not acceptable to say." Jenny laughs in her throat. "Oh, you sweet girl. I agree. God is not going to be kind to my husband when he is at the gates of heaven. Now, help me pack, and then you can have the rest of the day for your family." Later that night, Jenny can barely contain her excitement. Keeping her husband up with conversation and passion, he eventually succumbs to the weakness of sleep. Jenny sits at the window looking into the night sky, imagining the smells, foods, and people she will soon see. The morning light and the smell of the bedpans being dumped as a combination gave Jenny a rude string of thoughts as she woke. To her surprise, her husband had arranged the morning meal and was already smartly dressed and ready for travel. An hour later, Jenny was ready to leave. The carriage ride to the docks went by faster than she expected. She imagined her excitement and sleepiness was making her perceptions of the world slightly distorted. The giant iron boat had one enormous smokestack off-center, billowing? Oh, see, I told you, typos mess me up, and I do go through and look for typos, but sometimes I don't catch them all because, I'm not trying to edit it, and avoiding the urge to edit a story is hard for a writer. If you're a writer, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so one enormous smokestack off-center, billowing black cotton into the air. The mix of shiny white and stained wood made for a unique sight. The crowds of people, all filled with excitement to be traveling to the most interesting part of the British Empire. There were few wearing large hats filled with colorful feathers, few with caps that had tails. Jenny figured this was current fashion in the States. She never followed those trends. She was always reading about food and trying to find more information about people like herself. The cabin they were taken to was just the size of their bedroom, large enough for them and their luggage. There was a space to use as a bedpan in one corner of the room, with a pull string next to it, and a curtain you could close yourself off with. There was also a sink with some kind of faucet. Jenny was delighted that these modern items were on the ship. She was not sure she could deal with a bedpan situation on a boat. The running water was a curious thing. She wondered if they just pulled in seawater or if they did something else. A pamphlet describing the boat did its best to detail the capture of seawater, steam it, and charcoal filters, but it made no sense to Jenny. Her husband pretended to understand, like boys tend to do. The rest of the day, Jenny slept. She knew her husband was checking out the social areas and would find wherever they had music. The next morning is when Jenny decided things were not ever going to be the same. It was as she was walking... Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I'm trying so hard here. It was as she was walking the main deck. The daily need to stretch her legs for the hour lull in her social club that happened right after the second tea sitting is still inside her. Even if the boat was vibrating, the smell of the oceans was unlike anything in her walks. She still felt comfort from it. It was also uneasy not to have to set up the meal, but having to accept whatever was being stocked in the ship's kitchen. They had thinly cut bacon and ribeye steaks with oranges and apples. The menus described the eating habits of the Eastern Americas and how the sensibilities of the European world, with the access to larger stores of fruits and meats, made for unique eating habits. There was no crumpet or tea biscuit either. They had what they called potato bread and sweet cakes that were interesting to Jenny, but not something she wanted to try. Her husband had discovered a group of men that liked to play chess and talk politics. He promised to spend the evening with her. Jenny did not mind at all. Most of the ship's crew were born and raised in the Americas. The accents they had were a strange blend of an older British way of speaking and some slight changes in sounds and pitch she assumed was from the languages of the many nations. A few of the young men had an air of arrogance about them. They were all built well, square faces with a slight snarl they seemed to force at all times. They would say things like "yee-haw" and what sounded like "pardner." All of them were not as keen on the non-white-skinned passengers. Hey, they still did as they were asked, and did it with a quality and quickness. Yeah, okay, there we go. But she noticed they often seemed to misunderstand people with her skin color, and they absolutely hated anyone they deemed as a posh Brit. It disturbed Jenny. She had not seen this kind of behavior in her circles. Occasionally, people would be rude to a Hindi or a Muslim in London, but never passive-aggressive like this. Jenny wondered why these youths would be so rude to non-white people. Okay, so these are the people that are working on the ship. I'm not sure I made that clear, but in my head, I remember writing this. In my head, I made that clear somehow. All right. As she thought about the social structures in the Americas, it started to make more sense. The white families were not as wealthy as the many nations and the African descendants. The reparations and agreements with the royal family was not quite fair to the descendants of Washington and his compatriots. She thought this might be a good story to write. She could talk to these youths from the Americas and get their perspective. See how it syncs with that of the many nations people and the plantation owners that are what she would consider the aristocracy. The majority of the white people in the Americas, unlike England and Europe as a whole, were not running things. What if the queen was descended from an Egyptian, she mused to herself. That night, sitting at a large table of 12, Jenny and her husband were engaged in separate conversations, with the couples next to each of them. Her husband was snared by two sisters that admired his well-groomed mustache and how envious they were of his beautiful wife. He kept blushing. Jenny could tell he was not comfortable with these women flirting with him as they were. She felt it was funny because they were both old enough to be her gran. Jenny was caught up in a conversation about the status of the white man in the Americas and how the descendants of the Revolution should be lifted up higher into the society of the country they helped shape into the merchant power it is today. The couple tried to mimic the accents of the white youths on the serving staff. They were enraptured with the mythical struggle some tried to make the revolutionaries to be. I think that makes sense. Jenny politely reminded them that slavery was a world problem, and if it wasn't for the Archbishop, Pope, and the Caliph convincing the crown to stop slavery of a people, this world would have been built on the lives of countless people that were treated as animals. The couple sitting next to Jenny rebuked her words, loudly announcing that the idea slaves were treated as animals was a lie perpetrated by the crown to demonize revolutionaries to fuel the war effort. As they stood up, their chairs. This is why we're here, right? As they stood upon their chairs, a few of the staff calmly helped them off and escorted them out of the dining hall. The buzz that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room had a strong opinion, and the waitstaff seemed to be conflicted by what they were supposed to do. A few joined in with the group's claiming the revolutionaries were unjustly treated and the descendants deserved a large piece of the pie in Americas. A few words in Latin Jenny could not understand got her husband to his feet. "We need to get out of this room now." Pulling Jenny while holding her right forearm tightly, he pushed his way through a few of the clumps of people making it out to the deck, and quite out of breath. Part of his suit jacket was torn, and Jenny noticed her dress had been torn, and wine was soaking the edges of the fringes. "My husband, what is going on?" "I'm not sure I should worry." The crease in his brow conflicted with his words as he wrapped an arm around Jenny's waist, leading her down the deck. I just hope there is not a riot." "What?" Jenny sat and listened as her husband explained there was a group of white people from the Americas that were gaining popularity with the Anglo-Saxon and the Western European descended peoples. The movement was called the Confederacy, and they had political aspirations to rule the Americas and dismantle the royal family, to free themselves from the crown entirely. Jenny had heard nothing of this. She felt dizzy at she felt dizzy that a movement like this was not something she was aware of. His voice and his face were both somehow darker. Parliament and the other governments of Europe all decided to suppress news and information about this movement. But why? She started to notice her husband unpacking a box she had only seen one other time. "Why did you bring that?" "I'm afraid we got on the wrong boat." Opening the box with a revolver with wood on the handle shined in the light of the setting sun beaming through the porthole. "I wanted to open up the immigration of the many nations because we could start convincing them that they might want to learn a new battle technique and weapon technology to make sure they would be able to control any civil unrest that may jeopardize the hold the crown has. The stability of the known world relies on trade between our two continents. The amount of food they can grow year-round has been such a boon. If that closes off, Europe could become extremely weak." Jenny nods. She sees the truth of his words and tries to calm herself. "Okay. You said we might be on the wrong boat, and you are getting a gun made in New York ready for conflict. What should I do?" "If things turn to violence, I want you in a lifeboat and away from this ship." Looking through the various chambers and testing the switches of the gun as he speaks. "I do not care if it's only you on the boat. Do not wait. Once you are in one, you launch it." About to argue, Jenny stops herself. There were two things she learned about her husband over the years. First, he was never one to exaggerate. Second, when he decided something was the right thing to do, that is what was going to happen. "Yes, my husband, I will do as you ask." Placing the full chamber of the revolver in place, he grabs a bandolier from the same box, draping it over his head, putting one arm through. "Are you okay to fire a gun yourself, my dear?" Reaching into a small section of the box, he produces a smaller pistol with 4 holes in the muzzle. "This will shoot 4 times. All you need to do is move this switch and then pull the trigger. It has a bit of a kick and may not kill or fully stop somebody, but it will discourage people from stopping you." Taking the pistol, Jenny looks to her husband. "I will protect myself." "Why are you talking like I will be alone?" Even in the sunset glow, the room felt darker and colder. Kneeling before her, kissing her hands, deeply inhaling through his nose while holding her hands closer to him. Okay, that was a very convoluted sentence. He kneels and holds her hands close to him as he breathes deeply. "From what we know, the most militant of these people will target men first. They will go after any man of color first. Death, not capture. Women in the affirmed are easy enough to control. The manifesto we studied in Parliament in a secret session last month was shockingly cruel and feels like a movement to a form of belief and ruling that we think would be similar to a czar in Russia, but making an enemy out of any and all that do not conform entirely to the image they wish to maintain. We are calling it extreme nationalism. Jenny nods. That is a bit to digest, husband, but I understand. Standing and firmly holding the pistol, moving your thumb over the safety switch, then back down. It has been some time since I fired any weapon. The last time was a hunting rifle. Do I need to place any shells within? It uses bullets, and no. There are 4 in there. I cleaned it before coming here. I had it loaded and opened in the case. It will fire those times. The bullets are hard to come by, so even without a bullet, a gun is intimidating to most people, even after those 4 shots. Well, what now? Stepping closer to Jenny, wrapping his arms around her waist. Remember I love you until the sun expires and the stars themselves darken and beyond. Kissing her deeply, slightly lifting her, he sets her down. Make your way to the bow, starboard, and stay near one of the lifeboats and out of sight. If you hear shooting, get on the boat and leave. Nodding with tears, Jenny kisses him over and over. I love you. Walking through the narrow halls, they both move slowly and nod politely to everyone they pass. His evening jacket torn in a few places, still together enough to hide the bandolier underneath. Jenny carrying a large purse filled with both of their passports, money, her pills, and the gun. As they pass a food cart before reaching the deck, her husband grabs at some of the bread and fruit, stuffing his pockets and motions for her to do the same. Adding some of the bread, 2 oranges, and an apple to her bag, they continue to the deck. He kisses her again and motions Jenny to go the opposite direction he is facing. As she reaches the space, she notices a few families playing shuffleboard, and some people just looking out on the ocean, unaware of the trouble that was brewing in the dining hall. One of the children looks at Jenny with a wrinkled look before running back to the line of the deck chairs. Jenny wonders if anything will happen. How insane would it be if she found herself in some kind of adventure that involved her husband and a Shakespearean-level villain like the Confederates? It felt all too fantastic for her. An hour goes by and she wonders if she should go back to the cabin. The jacket she grabbed was enough to keep her warm, but the harshness of the wind was not doing her skin any favors. She lamented not grabbing any cream or lotion. She decides to just think about good things. The park she would walk on her free hours, the smile of her husband, the smell of pork belly. She nods close to the edge of sleep when the first pop gets her sitting up. Unsure if it was a gunshot or just something like a deck chair collapsing, she plays with the handle of the pistol in her purse. Sorry, I thought I was going to burp. Isn't that so very ladylike of me? Oh, yes, I'm going to burp and get... Oh. Okay, anyways. This tense situation and I'm making jokes. Go figure. A few moments go by. She feels every passing fraction of time as hours. She gets a feeling of pain in her eyes, keeping them open, forcing them not to blink. She's about to scream from anticipation. Then another pop she cannot make for anything but a gun, quite possibly the hand cannon her husband had. She stands hearing another of other shots of various textures, hunting rifle, handgun, some that sounded like steam engines when they seized. She could not move. Each time her mind told her to move, her body denied her. Her mouth became dry, her hands stopped working, and her palms became damp. There was a sound in her ear, filling the space between the pops, an explosion of gunfire. It was the sound she never heard before. It was nothing she felt she actually heard, but she heard it. She started to yell inside of her mind, "Move!" She began to sweat. The taste in her mouth became sour. She started to shuffle out onto the deck to get to the lifeboat ladder. From behind her, she hears the voice of one of the older women that was talking to her husband. "Darling, we need to go." Pushing on Jenny, they seat themselves. Pushing by Jenny, they seat themselves. The other woman waves to a few other people, looking at them with a desperation. 3 more people, 1 older man, 1 young woman, and 1 child. The older woman lowers the lifeboat into the water, snaps at Jenny's face, showing her the oar. Snaps at Jenny's face, showing her the oar, demanding she begin to paddle. Hours go by. The boat just out of clear sight. Jenny can't be sure if they're going in a line away from the boat or not. The older woman seems confused by all of this as well. The older man passed out from stress, and the other 2 are wrapped up together, comforting each other. Helen, the older woman says to Jenny, reaching out her hand. Jenny, taking Helen's hand, shaking it. Jenny, we can't go back to that ship. We need to figure out how to get closer to the British Isles to get picked up. It's obvious we are both a bit shit at navigation. Do you have a suggestion? Well, my husband taught me a little about the stars. I can try to use them to navigate, but I'm afraid I might get it wrong. The woman wrapped around the child sits up. I'm sorry, I could not think. My daughter... I will help any way I can. She looks down, stops talking. The child looks at her mother's face. They killed Daddy, she says, turning to Helen and Jenny. Helen and Jenny look at the woman, then to the old man. Helen says, Old man, your manhood is active, so I assume you are as well. The mother shields her child's eyes, blushing herself. Jenny smiles with a side glance to the dirty woman Helen obviously is. Yeah, what of it? I'm an old man. Wake me when we are rescued. Turning to his side, putting his face into the hull of the boat. Helen looks around before taking a deep breath. Listen, you waste of blood and skin. If you do not try to help us out, I will drop your worthless ass into the water, and you can sleep floating on your back until you get rescued. The old man shifts to look at Helen. What kind of God-fearing lady would do that? I doubt these fine women would let you do that. Jenny starts to speak before Helen stops her with a hand over her mouth. Leaning over to get closer to the old man, Helen says, I will cut you, and they will celebrate. If you doubt that, keep laying there. I will give you 30 seconds. The mother looks up from her stone stillness. I will help her if you do not wish to help. Jenny looks at the man, waiting to catch his eyes. Sisters before misters. The stunned look on the old man washes the arrogance once there. Helen hands him an oar. Can you navigate the ocean? He grunts. I thought Darky here knew how, he says, motioning to Jenny. Her hand slams across his face with alacrity. Nobody has ever said that to me or about me in my life, you pathetic cunt. Jenny surprises herself with her action and words. Wow, I'm so sorry. Don't be, Helen says. Yeah, the old man says. You're right not to take that from me. I forget my manners at times. I've not been around people other than the fellows in my gentleman's club for over a decade, since my wife passed away. A deep breath calming him, his voice weakening. I am Harry, Lieutenant Harry Cooper of Her Majesty's Navy, at your service, Madam Helen. Again, forgive me, Miss Jenny. What kind of man doesn't test the limits of his situation? Now, I know you were in the service, and I expect an apology. She smiles, reaching out to shake his hand. Can you navigate us to a place we will be noticed? Aye. We have to go for at least half a day, wait for around 10 in the morning, and shoot off a flare. Should be seen by someone in a shipping lane. The hours that follow hold a hollowness for Jenny. She continues to picture her husband, recalls the delight she had to go to Boston and meet a two-spirit, now in a lifeboat with strangers to hopefully be picked up by a friendly merchant ship, not knowing what might have happened to her husband. What was going on in the dining hall? Why was there gunfire? Sunrise was harsh to everyone in the small boat. The awkward sleeping positions and the dampness of everything due to the wind spraying ocean on them in irregular intervals. The child became sick a number of times. The young mother pulled typos. It's always typos that really mess me up. Typos and just like run-on sentences or sentences that made sense because I completed them in my head. So, the young mother pulled thin from lack of sleep. The old man and Helen having traded sleep rotations with Jenny as he directed how to maintain direction in the ocean. Jenny gave the apple to the girl, one of the oranges to the old man, and shared the other orange with Helen. She had enough bread to give everyone a chunk in the morning. The lifeboat had a first aid kit, some hand flares, water, some more food, and some other items. Helen took command of the supplies and suggested the other rations be held back for an emergency. There were 6 bottles of water. She kept the extra bottles under her seat at the bow. Lieutenant Cooper suggested lighting one of the hand flares shortly, and to do this every 3 hours, as they should be seen by a boat by then. If not, they would have to try to make it closer to land. Jenny felt like something was just not right. How is this her story? She was supposed to be with her husband, to help open the borders of Britain to a people she had read so much about and wanted to meet. A people so unique when compared to all of the peoples of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Even the little-known island peoples were not as unique as the people of the many nations. Looking up to the sky, she imagines the bear and owl she had read about. She had read that they admire in some of the tribes. Others had wolves or deer. There were so many beliefs and ideas, and there were so many in communities that were not countries, but they might as well have been. They did not have the same corrupted views of politics and colonization. They lived with the land, and the settlers turned revolutionaries tried to burn it all and build iron roads through the entire expanse of the land that belonged to others. She believed in God, the grace and glory of Jesus, and felt that there was space for the great animals, Allah and Yahweh, and all of the other gods. She felt sleep overcome her as Lieutenant Cooper was saying, "Ahoy!" She barely noticed being taken onto the naval boat. She was in the sick bay when she woke up. The nurse explained she had been in shock and she would be fine. The nurse also asked if Jenny had any special requirements for shaving or makeup. Jenny was thankful for this consideration. After a few hours, she was discharged and taken to the main deck. The captain looked her over. "So you are Christopher Crowfield's wife?" "Yes." It was so strange to hear her husband's name. She called him husband at all of the time. She never had reason to name him. It was the first time she noticed that. "Do you have word of him?" "No, ma'am. We were told to find your craft this morning. Your husband and a few others are important people, and we are trying to find that boat. It is not where we expected it. We looped back around and found you. We expect that they are now adrift." "Do you know what happened?" "These damn Confederates got hired into some of the civilian ships and were going to try to kidnap any member of Parliament or anyone connected to the Crown, we found out. Your husband was on the short list of people they wanted, badly." "What's going to happen now?" Jenny was hoping he was going to say she would join them on the hunt, that she would be given regular updates and kept in the loop. "We have a vessel meeting with us in a few hours. You and a few others will transfer to that craft and you will go back home. We hope to have your husband unharmed in a day or two." "I am sorry, miss. It is the best we can do right now." Jenny begins to sob softly as an ensign ushers her out, leading her to a small room with 2 bunks. Helen asleep in the other bunk. Jenny sits, plants her hands into her face, and cries. A few hours later, the other craft comes. About a dozen people Jenny assumed was from the same passenger ship she was on board with her. They are each given their own room and some basic clothing to change into. 2 days later, they dock and military escorts take her home. Her home feels empty. The staff still gone, not expecting her back for a month or longer. Her husband's absence. Okay. Her husband's presence is absent, even though it is the time of day he is generally at the assembly hall. Knowing he is at sea, may be injured, or worse. That makes his absence felt much stronger. A few weeks go by. Jenny has the staff working less. She works more. Her friends send messages asking if she is in need of company or assistance of any kind. Parliament and the House of Lords both send over messengers regularly with confirmation of no new updates and the occasional promissory note to use for expenses. Jenny stops feeling sad. The space in her heart becomes cold after the 3rd month. It's impossible for her to want to leave the house, impossible to want to be around people. Her social appointments are missed, her work suffers. She decides to spend time at home. Parliament and the House of Lords agreed to secure her financial safety after the 7th month. She is given news that her husband will be declared dead after an entire year has passed. The last week of the 12th month, Jenny buys a typewriter. Her husband is declared dead the following week. She lives to the venerable age of 90, remarried to a man that worked as a shoemaker. Jenny's pen name she chose was Harriet Beecher Stowe. Okay, I know I'm cheesy and everything, and I know that was sad, but I honestly, I can't help, writing tragedy and, stuff like that. It's my bag. It's my flavor. It's what I like. But I think I created a pretty compelling story. I felt Jenny was a nice character to write. I felt her husband was a really great character too. I really enjoyed the idea of the religious leaders of the time all getting together and all deciding that, hey, slavery kind of sucks ass. Can we not do that? And kind of predicting the rise of fascism, the fall of the czars, and I don't know. Maybe it was too much world building and not enough story, but to me, I felt Jenny's experience is very akin to what happens to a lot of people in times of turmoil, especially that kind of turmoil. You expect you're going to be going somewhere and doing something fantastic and special, and then somebody else changes things, and it becomes really inconvenient and upsetting and bothersome. And there's no controlling that, and you just want it to have gone differently. And that's just not how it went. But yeah, I think Jenny being related to an actual author, even though that author was a white woman, I think she was white. Yeah, she was white. I just remembered her name and then looked up how to spell it. I should go back and read about her, but I wonder if that was a bad idea. Anyways, I felt it was a pretty good idea. If it's an alternate reality, an alternate timeline, of course, different birthing patterns would happen. Yeah. I might revisit this timeline. I kind of like the idea of, a bunch of pissy white folk being like, we don't like these First Nations ruling stuff. We came here, it's ours. I know, that's terrible. I'm so sorry, everybody. please, please don't be mad at me. But yeah, I do think that this the context of the story, the characters, I do think I did everybody a justice as far as characterization, and I wasn't insulting. At least I hope so. Anyways, you gotta like and subscribe below. Drop a comment on me. Send me an email. You can send me an email at firstdraftsthatglow@gmail.com. You can visit me at nailsthatglow.com and find ways to contact me there. I'm on Mastodon, Eldritch Cafe, Nails That Glow. Again, I've got coloring books, and you wanna buy one, and you wanna color in it. Athens and I worked really hard on these. But, yeah. Goodness. I do want to go back and write more about Jenny, maybe. If not her, maybe a story about her husband and what happened to him on the boat. My partner says that I write some stories that are like the first part of a book, the first third of a movie. That I just kind of end it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't want them to go over, 10,000 words. And sure, this one was much shorter, but, I average about 7,500 words, sometimes 8,500 words. But, I sometimes naturally reach what I feel is a proper end. And that's what I did here. And I really do hope you liked it. I want to thank you again for joining me for First Drafts That Glow. What is this, episode 21? Oh my God. I'm so terrible at remembering names of stuff. What was this? Somatic and Authentic. There we go. And I already wrote next week's story. Which is a murder mystery. And that one is, fuck. What is its name? Spectacular Tick. And it's a murder mystery. And as always, all of my characters are part of the LGBTQ IA plus community. I very occasionally throw in Black, Indigenous, people of color. Just people of color in general. I try to add into my stories because, part Latinx here. I know I'm pale AF, but come on. Not all Latin people are super dark. Just some of us are super pale. But, anyways. Just there's always too many white people in stories. Just, can we not, anyways. All right, I'm getting derailed, and I'm pretty sure you want to go. Again, thank you so much for joining me for First Drafts That Glow. Like and subscribe. I'll see you next week. And remember, I love you.